Hi, Phanessa here. In this video, I am going to demonstrate how to crochet knit beanie in super bulky weight yarn. So I'm updating the video that I already have on my channel. It's pretty old and it's just time to update the old video. This is a beginner friendly pattern. You can check out my shops for the PDF pattern if you want to follow along with that. Otherwise, let's get started. So I'm using Lion Brand's Hometown USA. I don't have the label for this one, but I think it's Cincinnati Red, and it is super bulky weight. You need a pair of scissors, a tapestry needle. So these are specifically made for larger yarn. See how big it is? These are Susan Bates. They come in really handy, or you can just get a large eye tapestry needle. So you'll need a stitch marker or a contrasting color yarn to mark the beginning of your round. These are ones I made myself. I have a tutorial for how to make these cute little stitch markers. I'll go ahead and link that here. Or you can use a ring or whatever you have on hand. I'm always losing these things. So for the needles, you'll need a 16-inch circular needles. Now this one I have is a US 13 and it's a fixed circular. So you can get one of those. I have my US 13 here on an interchangeable, so I can change these out for a larger one when it's time to switch. So again, for the needles, you can get away with using just one size, but I recommend using two sizes because it'll give the top of your body a little looser fit. You want your brim a little snug, and then you want to switch out to the US 15 of 10 millimeters for the body of the beanie. So I normally close my crown with the modified magic loop. I'll go ahead and link that. But for this tutorial, I'm going to decrease the crown with double pointed needles. I get asked a lot how you decrease the top with double pointed needles. So in this tutorial, I'm going to be using double pointed needles to close up the crown. So if you want to add a pom-pom, you'll need a pom-pom maker. This is Clover's extra large pom-pom maker. You'll need another skein of yarn. So I decided that I want a contrasting color, so I'm going to use a cream color here. Let's get started. So you want to start with a long tail cast on. So you want to pull a pretty long tail. So you can grab your knitting needles or your double pointed needles and then just wrap the yarn around the needles with the number of stitches you want to cast on. So this is going to be the length I need for my cast on. So the tail part is going to be in front of you. The working yarn is going to be on this side. So you're going to make a loop, place your finger and your thumb through this loop here, and then you want to hold the two strands with your other fingers. Doesn't matter how many you use, but you need this finger and this finger to hold your strand. So I'm going to grab my needle and I'm going to place it under this strand here, and then I'm going to pull it back like that. So it's like a slingshot. So now you want to go under the strand here, over to the index finger, the strand here, come back through the loop, and then gently tighten. Now you have two loops on your needles. Again, you want to place your finger and thumb in between the two strands, pull back, grab your needle under the strand closest to you here, over the strand closest to you on this finger, and then you're going to pull it right through this loop, okay? and then let go and gently pull it towards the needle. Don't over tighten this or it'll make it really hard to work your first round. Again, under this strand here closest to you, over the strand closest to you on this finger, and then there's this loop here you're going to come back through. Okay, so I'm going to cast on 40 stitches. If you're following the pattern, just cast on the number required for the size you're making. So I have 40 stitches, and you want to lay it down to make sure that your stitches are not twisted. If they are, they'll look something like that, where it's twisted. So you want to make sure that it's not twisted. And then what you want to do is join your round. So you can join right into the next stitch, but what's going to happen is it's going to leave this gap. So what I like to do, and I recommend that you do this as well, is join with the invisible join. So in order to do that, you want to cast on one additional stitch. Okay. Now you want to lay it down again to make sure it's not twisted. So what you're going to do now is grab this needle. This is where all your yarn, your working yarn and tail is. You're going to slip this stitch off, and you want to slip it purlwise. So through the front loop in the front of this needle, and then you just want to pull that off this needle. Now you're going to grab this stitch here with this needle and then pull it over this one. Okay. Insert right into that second loop and then pull it over, making sure this one stays put, and then drop it. Now this is going to come undone a little bit, so you just want to tug the two ends, the tail and the working yarn, to tighten that. Now you have joined your round. So grab a stitch marker, and then you want to place it on this needle because we're going to start working around in this direction. So the additional stitch you casted on has been dropped, so you should be back down one stitch to the number that you need for your pattern. Okay, so I'm going to work a 1 by 1 rib, so that means I'm going to knit 1, purl 1, and then alternate all the way around. Knit, purl, knit, purl. So to knit your first stitch, you want to insert your needle through the front loop in this direction, and then you're going to wrap your yarn around your needle, and then you're going to pull it up through this loop, and then you're going to push this loop off. You've knitted your first stitch. Now you're going to purl the next stitch. So you want to make sure your working yarn is in the front. When you knit, it's in the back. When you purl, your working yarn is in the front. So now we're going to insert our needle in this direction, still through the front loop, but we're going in this direction instead of that direction. Wrap your yarn around your needle, and then pull the loop through and drop this stitch here. You've purled your first stitch. So you want to knit the next stitch. So working yarn in the back, insert your needle, wrap your yarn around, pull it through, and drop this stitch here. Okay, purl, yarn in the front, insert your needle this direction, wrap your yarn, pull it through, and slide this stitch off. Okay, so I'm knitting continental. If you are knitting English style, your yarn will be over here, and then you want to make sure it's in the back when you're knitting your stitches. Insert your needle, wrap your yarn, pull it up, and then pull this one off. Yarn in the front, Insert your needle in this direction, wrap your yarn, pull down the loop, and pull off this stitch. Yarn in the back, insert your needle, wrap your yarn, pull it through, and drop this needle. So you just want to make sure that when you're purling, your working yarn is in the front, and when you knit, your working yarn is in the back. So you're going to repeat that all the way around. You're going to stop right before the stitch marker. As you work in the round, you're going to want to slide your stitches along your cable and your needle because you want the stitches to keep going in this direction. So I sort of just push it along the way as I'm knitting. Okay, so I'm at the last stitch here. I'm going to purl my last stitch. Okay, so I'm going to move my marker. Now I'm going to continue working this 1x1 rib for another, let's say 5 rounds. So you want to knit the knit stitches and purl the purl stitches. If you get a little lost, you can take a look at your stitches. So these little bumps here, those are your purl stitches. So if you see a bump, it's a purl stitch. If you just see your regular stitch, that's a knit stitch. So every stitch that has a bump in front of it, or sort of a loop around the stitch, that's a purl stitch. So I'm going to repeat working another 5 rounds of the brim. I've completed 5 rounds and I'm on the last stitch that I need to purl. So now you want to switch out to your 10mm needles. I couldn't find my 10mm needles. It's probably on a different project. So I'm just going to grab another set here. Again, if you just have your 9mm, the US 13, you can continue with that needle if that's all you have. Okay, so now we're just going to knit every stitch. So this was the end of the round. Because I'm switching out, I'm using a new one. I'm just going to knit the very first stitch. And then we're no longer purling, so we're just going to knit every stitch. So I'm coming up on my last 2 stitches. I'm going to place my marker back on my needles. Now for the rest of the beanie, we're just going to work in the round, knitting every stitch around. So right into the next stitch, knit your stitch, into the next stitch, knit, into the next stitch, knit. So you're just going to continue knitting every stitch on every round. Okay, so just follow the instructions on the pattern for the size that you're making. Okay, so your decrease is going to be about 2 inches. So you want to stop 2 inches before the desired height of your beanie, the overall height. So I'm stopping at 8 inches because I want a 10-inch beanie. So you can adjust that number for the amount of slouch that you want. Okay, so I am ready to start decreasing for the crown. My beanie right now measures 8 inches from the bottom of the needles to the bottom of the brim. For round 1 of decrease, we're going to knit 4 stitches and then we're going to knit these 2 together. So we're working a decrease when you work 2 stitches together. So I'm going to knit using the circular needle, and when it gets too tight for the stitches to go around the needle, I'm going to switch out to the double pointed needles. Okay, so knit 4. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, now we are going to insert our needle through the front loops of both of these stitches. Just like you're knitting a stitch, except you're going through both of these loops. Okay, through both of these loops, in one, out the other, and knit those 2 stitches together. So now you've decreased this stitch and this stitch into 1 stitch. So you're going to repeat that all the way around, working 4 knit stitches and then I knit 2 together. So that's 3, and 4. Now we're going to knit these 2 stitches together. So inserting your needle through both loops, you want to knit those 2 stitches together. So repeat all the way around, knitting 4 and then knitting 2 together. So at the end you may have stitches left that will not allow you to complete the repeat pattern. Don't worry too much about that. You're just going to knit whatever is remaining on your needle. Okay, so round 2, we're going to decrease the amount of stitches we work in between each decrease. So here we worked 4 and then 1 decrease. Now we're going to work 3 stitches and then decrease these 2 together. So 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to knit these 2 stitches together and then knit 3, 1, 2, and 3, and then knit 2 together. Okay, so repeat that all the way around. Again, if you end with any stitches that cannot be repeated again, go ahead and just knit those last stitches. Okay, I'm at the end of the round. We're now ready for round 3. So now we're going to work 2 stitches and then decrease the next 2. One, 2, and then knit these 2 together. 1, 2, and then knit these 2 together. Okay, repeat that all the way around. I'm at the end of the round. So now you can see that the stitches have reduced and it's getting harder to work in the round. So what you want to do is switch it out to your double pointed needles. So first you're going to count the number of stitches you have on your circular needles, and then you're going to divide that by 3. If you're using 4 double pointed needles to place on your work, then you can divide it by 4. In this case, I'm just using 4 needles total, so I'm placing 3 here and you need a free one to knit with. So double pointed needles usually come in sets of 5 so that you can place 4 needles on your work and then work with the 5th needle. I find that 3 works best for me. It's really personal preference. So I have right now, let's see, 2, 18, 21. We're going to work with 1 needle. So divide the 21 by 3. That's 7 stitches per needle. So you're going to slip off 7 stitches onto this needle. Just insert your needle purlwise, and then the next one purlwise. So we're just slipping 7 stitches onto this needle. 4, 5, 6, 7. So now I'm going to grab another needle and slip 7 more stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Okay. The last 7 stitches I'm going to slip onto the 3rd needle. So you can continue to place your marker so you know where the beginning of the round is. This is the first needle. So this is the beginning of the round. This is the first stitch. Okay, depending on where you stop, follow the pattern for your decrease. For this pattern right now, I'm at knit 1, knit 2 together. So I'm going to insert my spare needle into the first stitch there, and I'm going to knit 1. Okay. Now I'm going to knit these 2 together. And then continue my pattern, knit 1, knit 2 together. Knit 1. Now I've freed this needle here. I'm going to leave this needle here, turn my work a little bit, and then start working on these. Now I'm following my pattern. I ended with knit 1, so I want to knit these 2 together. So inserting my spare needle in through 2 of these loops, I'm going to knit these 2 together. Now you want to make sure that you have very little gap between the needles, so tug it a little bit when you start on a new needle. Now I'm knitting 1. And I'm knitting 2 together again. Okay. Knit 1. So because I only have 1 stitch left and I'm supposed to work a knit 2 together, I'm going to slip this one onto this one so that I can knit these 2 together. So if you're slipping it back this way, you just want to make sure that you're not twisting your stitches, okay? Now I'm going to knit these 2 together because that's the next stitch on my pattern. Again, I want to make sure that this first stitch here is tight between the needles. Now I'm going to knit 1 and knit 2 together. Knit 1 and knit 2 together. Okay, so this is the beginning of my round. My tail is right here, so I know that this is the beginning of my round. You can place your marker here, but mine just slides off, so I don't even bother. So my final round, I'm just going to work decreases all around. So every 2 stitches, I'm going to work a knit 2 together. Okay, pull that tight. And then this one is going to have to be placed with this one because I only have 1 stitch left here and I need to work a decrease that requires 2 stitches. So knit 2 together. I really prefer the modified magic loop for this, and I'll leave a link for that, but I do get asked how to use the double pointed needles to close up, so I want to be able to provide a demonstration for that. Okay, again, I have 1 stitch left on this needle. I'm going to place that on this one. Now I'm going to knit 2 together. And then I have 4 more stitches. I'm going to knit 2 together in the next set, and then knit 2 together in the last 2 stitches. Again, if you have 1 stitch left, just go ahead and knit that last stitch. Okay, so now I'm going to fasten off. I'm going to cut a long enough tail so that I can weave in the ends. And then I'm going to grab my tapestry needle. Now I'm going to slip my needle through the remaining stitches. So I ended here. I'm going to slip it off here, and I'm going to insert my tapestry needle knitwise as if to knit, and then pull it through. Next stitch, pull through, and you just want to pull it right off the needles. Okay, so you should pull tight, and then you want to secure the ends on the inside and then weave in your ends. Okay, so I'm going to insert this into the center, the hole here, and I'm going to tighten that, and I'm just going to run this through the center. You can see the little circle here. That's the center where we closed up the remaining stitches. I'm just going to run my needles through that circle once. You don't have to. I just want to make sure it's extra tight and closed. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just insert my needle through any of these loops that's close to this strand here, and then wrap it around my needle once. Place my thumb here to hold it still, pull this through so that ties a knot. And then you can weave in your ends. Don't forget to weave in your ends at the bottom. Sometimes it frays and I get very frustrated, so this comes in handy. Okay, so I'm going to weave this in on the inside. So I like to look at the cast on stitches here, and I want to make sure that there's no knot and that it looks good. So what I'm going to do is just follow here, stick it through. Okay, so that looks good to me. And then I'm just going to run it along one of these stitches. And you can weave this in however you want. Again, I'm going to secure it by making a knot and then weaving in your ends. I'm just going to cut this for this tutorial. Okay, so my beanie is 10 inches tall. Okay, so now you can add a pom-pom if you want. Okay, now I'm ready to make the pom-pom. And this comes in 2 pieces. You want to make sure that you place this metal pin into the hole on the other side. And then you open this here. And then you're going to grab 2 of them. Okay, so I'm going to hold one end in here, and then I'm going to start wrapping my yarn around this thing. I want to slide it as far to the side as possible. Once I get to the end, I want to wrap the pom-pom maker back in this direction because I want a thick and full pom-pom. So I'm just going to go back in this direction, making sure I fill in any gaps as evenly as I can around the pom-pom maker. So I'm just going to go back and forth until I feel like it is the right thickness. So this is good for me. And you can play with it and eventually you'll figure out what the right size is for you. So now you're going to close this up. So instead of stopping to cut this off, I just go right across to this side. You can cut it off and then just repeat what you did over here, but I'm just going to pull that right across. Make sure I go around this piece now and start wrapping it like I did on the other side. Okay, you want to make sure that both sides are the same thickness, or at least close to the same thickness, and then you want to close this part as well. Now you're going to cut your yarn. So there's that space that was right here between these 2 pieces. That's where you're going to insert your scissor and cut along the top here. So just insert the bottom of your scissor right into that space and start cutting around. Okay, so this is where I crossed over. I just cut that piece and then I'm going to continue cutting all the way around. Now you have something that looks like this. Now you want to grab a long piece of yarn. This is about a little bit over 24 inches. So now you want to go into that space. So this space here between these 2 pieces, you want to push that in and then tie after you tie your 1 knot, bring it back around this side, pull it. Okay, we're just going back in between that space. Now on this side, I'm going to tie 2 knots. I want to make sure my pom-pom is secure. Okay, 1. And then 2. Now you can pull these tabs here and open. And then pull the 2 tabs on this side to open, and you can remove the pieces. And you want to fluff your pom-pom and then trim the long pieces like this one, and then just shape it. So anything that I see is sticking out, I'm going to trim a little bit. Okay, so once you're happy with the size of your pom-pom, you can now attach it to your beanie. So the long tail is to get it into your beanie. So right on the top of the beanie, remember we have our ring here. So you want to insert one tail on one side and one tail on the other side. So I'm going to insert it 2 stitches back. I find that it's a little bit more stable if I do that. If I insert it too close to the center, it gets a little wobbly. Okay, so on the opposite end of that side, I'm going to go across here and then find the, so here's one stitch here, I'm going to insert it through the second one. Okay, and then you pull both those through and then access the center. I didn't weave that in. Let me cut it real quick. Okay, so I like to tie 2 knots. I know, me and my 2 knots. Huh? There's 1 and 2. Okay, now I'm going to grab each end. Actually, I'll do both of them at the same time. You can do this individually, or you can do them both at the same time. You know me, I like to save time. So back into the hole, anywhere, and you want to make sure you go through as close to the center as possible. And you want to come up on the other end, top end, pull it up. Okay, then you want to cut the ends off here so that it lines up with the rest of the pom-pom. Okay, I'm going to add a tag here. Alright, so here's your basic chunky beanie. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification button so that you will be notified every time I post a video. Alright, I'll see you next time.